Hello and welcome back to the coffee table where we spill the tea, or should I say coffee, on our favorite books. Today we'll be talking about Hunger Games Chapter 7, 8, and 9, and huge surprise, we'll be finishing Part 1! So yes, as you heard, we will be finishing Part 1 of the 3 parts of Hunger Games, and we will be moving on to the games, which talk about, the actual Hunger Games and what happens in the Hunger Games. So, before we actually start with Chapter 7, 8, and 9, let's do a little bit of recap. So, a bit of a recap for each chapter. Chapter 4 mainly focused on Katniss's time on her trip and her kind of reliving everything that happened in the past, I would say a couple of hours, and then her really regretting a bunch of stuff that she did in the past, like not apologizing to her mother for her leaving and stuff. And then chapter 5, I think it was, basically just focuses on the opening ceremony and Katniss, the girl who was on fire, Sparkles. And then chapter 6 mainly focused on, I didn't really find chapter 6 that interesting, but what I thought chapter 6 mainly focused on was Katniss's past. Like, an example, or the main example of that would be the Avox girl, and how, the Avox girl might like to see Katniss die, because Katniss was kind of the one to blame for the Avox girl's little friend dying. So that's the recap, and now on to chapter 7. In chapter 7, Katniss wakes up from a nightmare, and what she sees, the Avox girl, images from the reaping, with her mother and Prim unreachable and terrified. She then wakes up yelling for her father to run from the explosion that killed him. Obviously we don't really start off with a good start for this chapter, or Katniss doesn't really start off with a good start to her day. But so she gets ready, heads down for breakfast, and while she's alone, since no one else was there for breakfast, she starts thinking to herself about her mother and Prim and what they must be doing right now and how they felt about her debut at the opening ceremony the previous night. And so after about a couple of minutes, Haymitch and Peeta come in, but Katniss is furious to see Peeta since she found out that their outfits were matching, but she brushed it off quickly. So once Haymitch finishes his breakfast, he finally, after forever, starts talking about training and strategies to Katniss and Peeta. And so he asks them if they want to be coached separately or if they want to be coached together, and they both decide to be coached together. So he asks if they have any skills, and Katniss says that she can use a bow and arrow, and Peeta says that he's kind of strong. And then so when Katniss says that she can use a bow and arrow, Peeta then butts in and says that she's this incredible huntress, and she never pierces the body, she's always aimed to the eyes, and this assessment of her skills by Peeta, it steers Katniss in the wrong direction, as if he's trying to plan something against her. So they then go back and forth about each other's talents and abilities, and they then get into an argument of whose abilities are better and how they would keep them alive and how the abilities would help them win the game. And so Peeta then says that his mother said that District 12 might have a winner for once and that she's a survivor, and he knew that the mother meant the winner would be Katniss, and that shuts Katniss up. And then Peeta says that they would help her win, what are they called? Sponsors, I guess, is what he meant. But Katniss, she's people never helped her. She kind of reflects once again, and she's when I was starving and my family was on the brink of death, no one helped us. We had to they had to fight for themselves and fend for themselves, and she had to do all this stuff. The only person who helped her was PETA, and like, I don't know, no one ever really helped her. And so once they both shut up about the arguments, Haymitch is like, there's no ensuring that there's going to be a bow for Katniss, but in the private session with the gamekeeper, she can show what she can do with the bow. And for PETA, he shouldn't underestimate his strength, because in a lot of instances for the Hunger Games, strength is a big deal. Haymitch then suggests that once they begin their training inside the actual training center area for training, they should spend time trying to learn things that they didn't know before, like how to throw a spear or swing a mace or learn to tie a knot, or like how to set up traps, and like they should save showing what they're best at until the private session, which basically what the private session is when the gamekeeper call you in for privately, so you can show them what you're good at, and they can rate you, and the higher your rating is, that means the gamekeeper liked you more, and that also helps encourage sponsors to sponsor you. And also, it's kind of a threat to have a higher score, because people would be going after you first to try and kill you. Haymitch then gives them one final piece of advice, which is for them, for like whenever they're in public, they should stay together no matter what and act like they're best friends, and it wasn't up for discussion. And so then once he's done with that, he's like, meet Effie in the elevator at 10 for your training. So at 10, they both head to the training room, and when the doors open for the from the elevator to the training room, it's like this huge gym filled with like a bunch of weapons, obstacle courses, weights, and all that stuff. And like, even though it wasn't 10 yet, like it was before 10, they were the last ones to arrive. And I guess like all the other tributes, they want to be there earlier so they could get a head start. So for the gym, it's like there are a bunch of different sections and stuff, and like the sections have like lessons on how to tie knots, or like sword fighting or throwing spears. And so throughout a couple of days, like we get this montage of like Katniss and PETA training and doing stuff until it's the third day, and which the third day, it's the day of the rating, or like the private sessions with the gamekeepers. And since Katniss is a part of District 12, District 12 goes last. So she sees each tribute go into the private room one by one until like it's her turn. And by then, like she's the last person. And by then, like the gamekeepers are already uninterested. And so she does a couple of things. And Katniss, so Katniss picks up a bow and arrow, and she goes to the shooting range area, and so she starts by like shooting the standard bullseye and human silhouette, but like the gamekeepers aren't really interested in it, like her shooting, so she decides to be flashy with it. And so the gamekeepers, like, they were eating and stuff, and there was, like, this pig with an apple in its mouth, and she decides to be flashy, and so she shoots, I think it went, like, she shoots the apple in this roasted pig's mouth, and she can hear, like, the gamekeepers being all alarmed and stuff, and then as like this finale, she says, "Thank you for your consideration," and she gives a slight bow with a walk straight towards exit without even being dismissed, which to me that's very, very flashy. And you would think she would probably get eliminated or get a really low score, but we'll have to find out in the next chapter, chapter 8. Okay, so this chapter is going to be a little bit longer since it was fairly lengthy, but let's start off at the beginning. So Katniss had just gone out of the private session with the gamekeepers, and she was absolutely furious. Like, she was throwing tantrums, throwing her bow and quiver across the room. She punched the number 12 button that takes her to her quarters. And then when she finally makes it to her room, she absolutely breaks down crying. Like, she's having a mental breakdown. Like, she felt like she ruined everything, and she could hear her team yelling for her to like get out and like to talk to them and get out, but she would just like, go away, I don't want to talk to anyone right now. And she was just so frustrated with herself because like she couldn't bother getting up, and she was so convinced that she messed up and that like peacekeepers or the Capitol would like arrest her, or they would execute her or turn into an AWOX. And she was just, and she like, she wasn't actually trying to shoot the apple. She was trying to kill one of the gamekeepers, and she thinks that because of her little mishap that like she was thinking of what they might do to her sister Prim and her mother, and like how they would suffer because of her actions. And it takes her about like an hour to stop crying, until like when she stopped, she was just watching the sunset, and like she was expecting the guards to like take her and execute her publicly, but like as time passed, it seemed less and less likely. And like she kept making up these fake scenarios in which horrible things would happen to her. Like she would get a low score, or she would be killed immediately in the arena, or like she wouldn't get any sponsors. And like Effie, she taps on Katniss's door to try and get her out for dinner, and Katniss is just like, okay, I guess I'll just go, there's really no point in crying anymore. So she greeted by everyone on her team at the table, and like the adults had small talk. The kids, as in Peeta and Katniss, they just looked at each other because Peeta could tell Katniss wasn't very happy about what happened. So after the small talk with the adults, Haymitch asked Katniss and Peeta what they like what happened in their private sessions, and Peeta goes first, and he's like, I don't think it really mattered, since by the time he was there, no one paid attention to him. And Haymitch asked Katniss, and she answers with, and I quote, I shot the arrow at them, not exactly at them in their direction. It's like Peeta said, I was shooting and they were ignoring me, and I just lost my head, so I shot an arrow in the apple of the stupid roast pig's mouth. So Cinna asks what they said, and she's like, I don't know, I just walked out. She excused herself, and Effie was absolutely stunned. Like, she was shocked, and not in a good way. And so Katniss asked if they would like throw her out, or, like do horrible things to her. Haymitch is just like says that at this stage it would be such a pain to throw her out. And so Katniss is just asking questions like, would they kill my family? Will they do this to me? And Haymitch just like reassures her that they're not going to do anything to her, since it's a private match. Like, why would they do that? The public needs a reason of why they would, I don't know, kill her or throw her out. So Peeta and Haymitch start joking around about the situation to try and make it like lighter and try to make Katniss feel better about her little mess up. And it did. And it made Katniss feel a lot better. So after dinner, they head to the sitting room where they would be able to see the scores. And the scores for the richest districts were obviously pretty high, like District 1, 2, and 3. They were pretty high. And the other districts had pretty low scores. But District 12 finally came up. Peeta got an 8. And drumroll please. Katniss gets an 11 on her score. Katniss, the girl who was on fire, got an impressive 11, the highest score out of everyone. and everyone was like congratulating her, patting her on the back, just like, you go Katniss, and she did so good. And so after the whole little celebration, Katniss escapes her room, and like she gets under the blanket and stuff, and she was like really worn out from the crying, from the whole private session. And so she tries to go to sleep, but she can't stop thinking about District 12, and especially Gale, because I guess that's a thing now. And so we cut into like the 20th flashback of the book, which I think is getting a bit excessive, but whatever. And it's how Katniss met Gale. And so basically Katniss, she was competing for a squirrel with nuts, and like she just had a day of gathering and hunting. And like when she was running back to the fence to get back home, she saw like a rabbit hanging from its neck, and about 20 yards away from the first rabbit was another rabbit. So Katniss was about to like examine the rabbit and like the snare that caught the rabbit, but then out of nowhere, this handsome 14-year-old 16-foot man-looking boy came out, and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And so Katniss, like, she kind of knew him already, but like not really, because she'd seen him around school, and like she saw him in the Justice Building when her father died and when she was awarded the Medal of Valor, but she never like really talked to him until now. And so they introduced themselves, and like ever since then, she saw him smile for the first time, which I mean, yeah. And ever since then, they were like best friends, they were best buddies. And then she fell asleep. And then in the morning, Effie woke Katniss up and reminded her that the interviews were that day, which I'll talk about the interviews in chapter 9. And so Katniss wakes up, she goes to Haymitch and is like, "Hey Mitch, are you gonna be coaching me and Peeta?" And Haymitch broke her the news about the traitor. Peeta wanted to be trained separately. Oh my god, el chisme. There's so much drama here. But you'll find more about this in chapter 9. Alright, so in chapter 9, Peeta, he decided to have private sessions for the training for the interview, and Katniss now considers him to be a traitor, and she was really, really mad. Like, she was furious. She felt so betrayed by the boy who risked a beating to give her bread, the boy who studied her in the chariot on the opening ceremony, the boy who covered for her when it came to the Avok girl, and the boy who insisted Haymitch know her abilities. And then Katniss realized how much of an advantage it would also be to have her and Peeta not train together, because they don't have to wear magic outfits for one, and he would sooner accept the fact that they're not friends and they're enemies, and they're gonna have to kill each other if one of them wants to, see their families again. And so now that there's a new training thing, there's going to be a new schedule. So 4 hours with Effie and then 4 hours with Haymitch. So Katniss starts out with Effie, and Effie's training is basically it's basically how she looks and stuff. So the first part of training would be so Effie and Katniss head to Katniss's room, and Effie makes Katniss put on this full-length dress with high heels and instructs Katniss on how to walk properly in them. And Katniss was having a horrible time. Like, she hated it since she had never walked in high heels before, and she couldn't get used to all the wobbling around on the balls of her feet. And so the dress was another problem since it kept getting tangled in her shoes, and Katniss tried to hold it up, but Effie was like immediately on her case about it, and like Effie was like, "Don't show your ankles, no showing ankles." So eventually Katniss mastered it, and then came how Katniss had to master proper posture, eye contact, hand gestures, and smiling. And so by lunch, Katniss's muscles all over her face were like twitching, because she had to smile so many times and had to practice so many times for the quote-unquote perfect smile. So after lunch came her training with Haymitch. For the training with Haymitch, it was all about how Katniss was going to be oh my god, I can't talk. How Katniss was going to present herself. Like, if she was gonna be mysterious, or very cheerful, or like funny, or whatever. Like, and so Katniss, and like how she was gonna get sponsors. And so Katniss asked what Peeta's approach was, and it's like he wasn't likable and self-depreciating humor. I don't know. So to him, so then Haymitch like started telling Katniss what she looks like to him, and she said that Katniss was hostile and sullen and very mean, and she had to be likable and cheery and nice to get sponsors. So Haymitch was like, okay, let's practice. Pretend I'm a sponsor, or like I'm one of the guests there. And he was like asking her questions, and Katniss was just really too mad to answer any of the questions. And she was just being very stubborn and like not cooperative. And so like Haymitch gives up. He's like, your personality is deader than a dead slug, or it's worse than a dead slug. And like that kind of hurt Katniss, and you could see it. So he's like, okay, let's try again. And they tried again, and to no one's surprise, it failed again. And so he's like, okay, I give up again. You're on your own. Just lie your way through it. I don't know. And so, Katniss, that night, she had dinner in her room since she was too angry to look at Haymitch, and she was just taking her anger out in her room and absolutely destroying it. And so later that night, the Avox girl came in, and Katniss was like yelling at her to get out, but she didn't. She like went into the bathroom and got a cloth and started cleaning Katniss's face, and then she started helping Katniss clean it up. And Katniss felt so guilty, like that she didn't save the Avox girl's little friend. But the Avox girl, like, she forgave her, which is really sweet. So Avox girl tucked her in, and Katniss went to sleep. So then in the morning, Katniss's team was ready to get her ready, like her makeup, dress, all that stuff. So over until like the afternoon, Katniss she was getting pampered and getting ready until it was time for the actual interviews. And all the tributes went out into the stage, and like one by one they were being called out by the host, whose name is Caesar, and we'll see more of him at the end of the book. But they're getting called out and asked questions until it was Katniss's turn. And Katniss was just like really scared and nervous and stuff. And like she was frozen when he asked her first question. But then she saw Cinna, and like she regained her confidence. And so Caesar was asking her questions, like, what encouraged you most here, or like what did you find most special here? And I don't know, Katniss is just like really happy. She's giggling, she's like twirling around, showing off her dress, all that stuff, until it starts to get serious. And like Caesar's like, now tell me about your sister, how you volunteered as tribute. And Katniss tells about her sister. And then their time is up, and Katniss just had like a really good time, and like the audience loved her. They were clapping, cheering for her. They loved her. And so next came Peeta, and he was asking generic questions, and Caesar was like, oh yeah, is there a special someone? And so he was just asking questions, and the last question came where it's like, oh yeah, is there a special let me read it from the book. So Caesar's like, a handsome lad like you, there must be some special girl. Come on, what's her name? Peeta said, well, there's this one girl I had a crush on ever since I can remember, but I'm pretty sure she didn't know I was alive until the reaping. And then, so Caesar asked, do you have any other fellow? Peeta says, I don't know, but a lot of boys like her. Caesar asked, so here's what you do. You win, you go home. She can turn you down, then. So Caesar encouraged me, I don't think it's gonna work out. Winning won't help in my case. And then Caesar's like, why not? Peeta blushes, like really red, like tomato beet red, and stammers out, because she came here with me. Now that's a huge cliffhanger, or that's really surprising, but you're gonna have to wait till next episode to see what happens next. Now time for everyone's favorite part. Recap, favorite parts, ratings, predictions, and our question. So for a little bit of a recap, Chapter 7 is basically just a bunch of training and the training scene and like how Katniss wows everyone. Chapter 8, we really get to see like how Katniss wowed everyone. I think that one's where they reveal her 11 score, and then in chapter 9 it's basically just training for the interviews, and then it's the interviews, and then the whole Peeta confesses his love for Katniss. And so favorite parts during all of this, I think my favorite part was when the Avox girl helped Katniss and stuff to clean up her room, and she was like all forgiving. Or when Cinna, like I didn't mention this since it was getting a little bit lengthy, but when Cinna was like, oh yeah, if you ever get scared, just look at me, I'm here for you, I'll be here to encourage you, all that stuff. And it was just a really sweet moment. And so for ratings for all three chapters, so for not all three chapters combined, oh my god, for chapter 7 I would say 7.5. For chapter 8 7, and then for chapter 9 I would say it's a solid 8.6. And per usual, you can put your predictions down in the comments below. And then for our question, what personality do you think you would have? Like, would it be cocky, or would it be like, oh yeah, you're very happy to be like in the Hunger Games? What do you think it would be? Put your answers down in the comments. You just listened to another episode of Coffee Table with your host, Daniela. Subscribe to our podcast on YouTube, and may the odds be ever in your favor. Bye!